So over the last few years, I've gotten really into Jungian psychology, which I feel has benefited my life in a lot of ways. Now, if you're familiar with Jung, you know that at one point in time he was very close with Sigmund Freud. Freud was like a father figure to him. And Freud saw Jung as his protege. But as it turns out, they had a disagreement about the nature of the unconscious. And so they split, and Jung created his own framework of the unconscious. But recently I had a realization that there's a way to reconcile the two in a very simple framework, and I'm going to try to explain this. So let's start with Freud. Freud is known for his concept of the superego, the ego, and the id. The superego being like this moral consciousness that a person has that defines what's right and wrong, good and evil. The ego is basically like you, the individual. And the id is like your internal drives, like your drives for your primal drives for like food, water, sex, things like that. And the ego is basically trying to manage the needs of the id while adhering to the demands of the superego. Jung focused more on the shadow, which is the unconscious aspects of yourself that you are not aware of. Now, how do we reconcile the two? Here's how I basically did it. If Freud's concept of the superego exists, which is, again, your sense of right and wrong, from a Jungian perspective, there must be an anti-superego, or what Jung would call the shadow. Now, here's where the id comes into play here. I'm going to redefine what id means just a little bit. Instead of saying that the id is your instinctual drives, let's say that the id represents instinct itself, meaning that we all have a natural instinct to say or do certain things. And if you cannot act on your instinct, then you must either repress it or suppress it. Either way, it becomes shadow material, which means that aspects of the id are allowed to play out if it's acceptable to the superego. But if your instinct is not acceptable to the superego, then it gets banished over here into the shadow realm, and it becomes shadow material. See how this is? And the ego, which is kind of a common term between Freud and Jung, is caught in between. There are aspects of the id that are allowed to be played out according to the superego, and there are aspects of the id, which I say represents the instinct, that cannot be played out, and this becomes part of your shadow. And this is my attempt to reconcile Freud and Jung. For you psychology lovers out there, let me know what you think.